crowd here today. Welcome everyone. This is OLLI, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of South Dakota. We're coming to you today from all different places. We have friends from all over the country who are joining us. Our guest speakers today are wonderful friends from Deadwood, South Dakota, Carolyn and Tia, and they're going to be doing a presentation for us today, as you know, on the women of Deadwood. I hope you'll tune in later this week. We have a lot more coming, and maybe my voice won't be so deep next time we talk. So I'm going to turn it over to Tia and Carolyn. Thank you. All right, way to go. That was fast, Tia.
There. Oh, hi. Hello. I'm sorry. I was muted. I just unmuted myself. I'm Carolyn Weber, the Executive Director at Deadwood History Incorporated, and I'm here today with my coworker, Tia.
Hi, and I'm Tia Sensen-Cunningham, and I am the archivist with Deadwood History.
And we're really excited to be here today. Thank you so much for this invitation to present at your OLLI today. I want to tell you just a little bit about our organization. We are a nonprofit organization here in Deadwood, and we oversee the operations of the Adams Museum, the Days of 76 Museum, the Historic Adams House, the Homestake Adams Research and Cultural Center, and the Brothel Deadwood. So we keep ourselves pretty busy, but we have managed to shave out some time today for you guys. So we want to introduce you today to four fabulous females that were in Deadwood at one time and had kind of a important presence here. So Tia is going to start off with the first one, and then we'll switch out back and forth, and then we'll have a few minutes for question and answer and wind it up after that.
Make sure this is, there we go. Perfect. So our first fabulous female is Lucretia Marchbanks. So what was a single middle-aged African-American woman doing in the raucous and body 1876 mining camp of Deadwood? Much more than many of the men. As an enslaved woman, Lucretia Marchbanks experienced the 1849 California Gold Rush and the 1858-59 Gold Rush in California, or in Colorado. After the Civil War ended, she gained her emancipation and was able to move around the country without constraints. Although she could not read or write, Marchbanks learned of Custer's 1874 discovery of gold in the Black Hills. This news, along with her previous gold rush experiences, prompted her to journey to Deadwood, Dakota Territory in 1876. Upon arrival, Marchbanks immediately found work as a cook at the Grand Central Hotel. And later at the Golden Gate Hotel, she quickly gained a reputation as the best cook in the Black Hills and was well known in the community, earning her the endearing nickname of Aunt Lou. She was also respected for her stance on not being intimidated by members of the disorderly male population. While working for the Grand Central Hotel, a Mexican man came into the restaurant boasting that he had killed an Indian and acted as though he'd like to do the same again, kill somebody. Aunt Lou would not tolerate her customers being upset or threatened and took matters into her own hands. She grabbed a large kitchen knife and with steely confidence confronted the man, who quickly decided that he had other places to be. In 1879, the community held a fundraiser to build a congregational church. A diamond ring was to be raffled off and to be given to the most popular woman in the hills. There were over 1,300 votes at 50 cents apiece were cast. Miners united in support of Marchbanks, who won with a total of 652 votes, claiming the esteemed title and a shiny diamond ring. Her impressive culinary skills and good business sense and the kind-hearted manner caught the attention of the administrative staff of the Father De Smet mine. Marchbanks was hired to serve as the mine's boarding house manager and cook for the mine superintendent at the headquarters mansion. She was paid $40 a month and worked for the mine through 4 successive superintendents. In 1883, Marchbanks decided she wanted to be her own boss. She resigned from the Father D. Smith mine and opened a boarding house near Central City, calling it the Rustic Hotel. Vacancies, for obvious reasons, were rare occurrences at Aunt Lou's boarding house. In 1885, Marchbanks ventured into a completely different career. She bought 240 acres of land located between Balua and Sundance, Wyoming territory, and purchased 49 head of cattle and began establishing her ranch. The ranch went through a series of ups and downs, but nothing that ever left Marchbanks vulnerable. While on the ranch, she tended to sick neighbors, helped birth babies as a midwife, and occasionally cooked for others to bring in extra income. Aunt Lou passed away in 1911 at the age of 79. She is buried in the cemetery at Balua, Wyoming. Lucretia Marchbanks is an outstanding example of the grit and determination by women during the settling of the American West.
Okay, now I'm going to pick it up after that, and I'm going to tell you about, of course, who doesn't know Calamity Jane? She's one of our favorite females here in Deadwood, but I'm going to tell you a little bit, some things that you might not know. Well, of course, we know her birth name was Martha Canary, and her date of birth is a little up in the air because there's been so many different ones put out there over the years, but the one that shows up most often is May 1st, 1856. And Martha was the oldest of 6 children to parents who were absolutely deplorable parents. They did not have any skills whatsoever. And then in 1863, this ragtag family, the Canary family, decided that they were going to go from Missouri to Montana to the gold fields out there, hoping for a payoff. Well, the things didn't go as they wanted out in Montana for this poor family either. The Canary children were often seen on the streets begging for clothing, food, and money. And then the parents were described by one local Montana newspaper as a gambler and woman of the lowest grade. Now, Martha's mother died in 1866, and then her father died in 1867. So this left the poor woman, she was actually a girl at the time, she was an orphan at just the age of 11 years old. So what were you to do when you're this young person left there all on your own? Well, you're going to survive by any means that you can. And so she decided that the way she was going to do this was to follow railroad, mining, and military camps. That's where all the population was. That's where the opportunity she felt. So in the late 1860s, she could often be seen in many locations across Wyoming territory due to the construction of the Union Pacific Railroad. Also, there were a lot of Army posts there, as well as there was a small mining boom going on at that time. So it was really the trifecta of opportunity for her there in Wyoming territory. And really, we always call her Calamity Jane. Well, there's no one defining moment that led up to her nickname. It was just a series of experiences because everywhere she went, calamity ensued. And how could it not? I mean, here was a person without supervision, not much of a moral compass, and she was attracted to adventure, and she was scrapping to survive. So, like we say, calamity just followed her. And then along the way, unfortunately, she became a very serious alcoholic throughout her life. And then she cursed like that was her first language. She was really good at it. And then she joined in on almost any dangerous opportunity that came along. I mean, she was out for fun and adventure, and she didn't have any responsibilities. But all of these things about Martha Jane Canary make me think that was everything that happened that she was doing, was that her way of fitting in to the world at this time, or was that her way of trying to stand out? That's what makes me curious about her. So she was along on the Newton-Jenny expedition that happened here in 1875, and that was led by Colonel Richard Dodge. And then another military expedition she was along on was led by General Crook. That was here in 1876. Now, women were generally not allowed on military expeditions unless they were to perform duties such as cooking or doing other kind of household type of duties. So to avoid any kind of detection, by the military personnel on these expeditions, and then also for sure to be kicked out, what she decided to do as a means to survive was dress like a man. So she would put on military uniform, and not that she really liked to dress that way, but like I said, it was a means of survival for her. And then she was also in Fort Laramie, Wyoming Territory in 1876. She was hanging around there, and she hooked up with the wagon train that was headed from Cheyenne to Deadwood. And who else do you think was on that wagon train? Well, of course, Wild Bill Hickok, he was on there. So they rode the wagon train into Deadwood, and Calamity Jane had received kind of regional notoriety by this time, for bad or for good. And so the community, when she arrived with Wild Bill, were met with cheers and jeers in the mining camp of Deadwood here. But when she got here, Calamity Jane found work as a cook. She found work as a waitress, a laundress, dance hall girl, and a prostitute. Because you guys, there were a few career paths open to women with no family, no education, no prospects, and a wild side to them. So she worked hard for her money. Whenever she had a job, she worked very hard, but unfortunately, she spent the majority of it on alcohol. But she was not all gruff and grunge, Miss Calamity Jane. No, she had a very feminine side to her, as you can see in the photograph here. And when there were medical emergencies in the city of Deadwood or the area out here, she would just jump into action and help those people out. And now she never really stayed long in one place. She kind of moved around from place to place. And she was married several times. And she became mother, honestly, to a daughter and a son that she really loved very, very much and tried to do the best by. But the lure of Deadwood back in 1903 brought Calamity Jane back here. And when she arrived in Deadwood, boy, she was a bedraggled state because she was really in rough shape from all those years of hard living. And then on August 1st of 1903, Martha Calamity Jane Canary passed away in the town of Terry, which is just about 7 miles south of Deadwood here. And then local businessmen from Deadwood went up there immediately after her death. They wasted no time collecting her body and bringing it down here to Deadwood, where she could be buried at Mount Moriah Cemetery, right next to, yes, you guessed it, Wild Bill Hickok. And it was kind of actually, if you think about it, great marketing ploy for these people, these businessmen, because honestly, we have been living off Wild Bill and Calamity Jane ever since here in Deadwood, so it worked out really good. And there's one thing I want to leave you with about Calamity Jane, and then I'll turn it over to Tia. There's a quote that's attributed to her, and I just love it, and I honestly think that it explains everything about her. She's been known to say, I figure if a girl wants to be a legend, she should just go ahead and be one. So that sums up Miss Calamity Jane.
Our third fabulous female is Dr. Flora Hayward Stanford. Deadwood's first female doctor arrived in 1888. Dr. Flora Hayward Sanford and her daughter Emma made the trip to Deadwood by train and stagecoach from Washington, D.C. Emma had been diagnosed with consumption, and Flora strongly believed that a change in climate would improve her daughter's health. Deadwood, with its fresh mountain air, she felt, would be just the right environment for Emma. Although Flora was married to a successful brick manufacturer in Pennsylvania, was the mother of a young son and daughter, and had a stable career as a teacher, something in her life was missing. At the age of 37, Flora decided she wanted to attend medical school to become a doctor. At the time, this was a fairly radical move for a wife, a mother, and a woman to make. There was a great deal of debate across the country as to whether women were fit to practice medicine. In 1871, the American Medical Association president Alfred Still believed women were morally unfit for the vocation, claiming them to be ignorant, inexact, untrustworthy, unbusinesslike, lacking in sense and mental perception, and contemptuous of logic. Flora apparently did not agree with Still's derogatory, demeaning, and degrading view of women participating in the medical profession. In 1875, she moved her son, daughter, and a nanny to Boston. where she enrolled at the Boston Medical College. According to the data collected by the Federal Office of Education, out of the total US population of about 38 million, only 63,000 students were attending higher education classes in 1869-70. And only 20% of those students were women. Flora was undeniability, a minority within a minority. 3 years later, in 1878, Flora's medical classroom education was complete. After this, she and her daughter Emma moved to Washington, D.C., where Flora received her internship. She left her son in Pennsylvania under the care of their father. Flora and Emma stayed in Washington for the next 10 years. Upon their arrival in Deadwood, Flora purchased a home at 374 William Street, from which she also ran her medical practice. She specialized in homeopathic medicine to treat the disease of women and children. The Free Dictionary defines homeopathy as treating disease by the use of small amounts of a drug that in healthy persons produces symptoms similar to those the disease is being treated. Flora acquired a number of patients, business was steady, and she became a well-respected member of the community. Young Emma kept to herself, busy with a variety of social events. She belonged to several clubs, societies, and guilds in Deadwood. She also had a lovely voice and sang quite often at gatherings, events, and church services. In addition, she was in charge of the impressive candy department at Goldberg's grocery store. Flora's life outside of her medical practice was very lively. She served on the Board of Education, the Women's Relief Group of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the 19th Century Club, and was a robust proponent of the women's suffrage movement. As an active member of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, Flora wanted to bring about social reform, even if it was on a small scale. That would explain this announcement that appeared in the 1891 issue of the Black Hills Daily Times. Dr. Flora H. Stanford will open a free dispensary at her residence on William Street for the benefit of women who are unable to pay. Necessary medicines will be furnished at the actual cost, which means from 10 cents to 25 cents. The dispensary will be open every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. By 1893, it became apparent that Deadwood's climate was doing nothing to improve Emma's health. The consumption, or now called tuberculosis, held an ever-tightening grip on young Emma, and her condition gradually deteriorated. Flora remained optimistic and was determined that California would provide the ideal environment. Upon hearing the news of their impending departure, the community rallied together, as the people of Deadwood have always done, to show their interest and concern. Mother and daughter were so well favored in the community that the earnest sympathy felt for Miss Emma Stanford in her illness was found substantial expression of yesterday in the circulation of the subscription list for her benefit, which bid fair late in the afternoon and represented upwards of $500. On January 30th, they boarded a train and headed west in hopes of a miraculous recovery for Emma. Unfortunately, Emma passed away less than a month later on February 27th, 1893. Shortly after Emma's funeral, Flora returned to Deadwood. She was grief-stricken and saddened, yet resolute to continue fighting for social reform to make a difference in the lives of those who are less fortunate. She quickly reestablished her medical practice in the house on William Street. She also took in boarders and rented out her front room from a young woman who operated a ladies' hairdressing business. Flora had a good sense of business. In 1897, she purchased a homestead near Sundance, Wyoming, maintaining the Double D Ranch. Now she was practicing medicine in both South Dakota and Wyoming and working to establish her 160-acre homestead. She traveled between 2 states and conducted house calls for patients throughout the local area without the advantage of modern transportation. It was all done by horse and buggy in the heat, cold, rain, snow, and the dark of night. This is a vigorous pace for anyone to keep up with. So it's not surprising that Dr. Flora Hayward Sanford died of a heart condition in 1901 at the age of 63. Gravesite rites were conducted at Deadwood's Mount Moriah Cemetery, where she was buried. It will forever remain a mystery as to why Flora decided to leave behind a life that by all appearances seemed fairly stable and comfortable. Why did she wish to trade that life for one that was uncertain, thick with prejudice, and dominated by men, and very demanding? Maybe she wanted something more challenging, something that tested both her mental and physical capabilities, something that she could master and proudly call her own. Maybe it was her desire to help others, to try to bring about some kind of positive change to those living in the shadows, or maybe it was simply that she had been stifled for too long and wanted to venture out into the world on her own terms.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought you were done. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to talk about our last final fabulous female here. And I'm sure all of you have heard of Annie Oakley, which is a renowned expert sharpshooter during the Wild West days. But have you ever heard of Frida Hartzell? Well, I am going to introduce you to her today. Frida was born on December 20th, 1891 to James and Mary Hartzell. They lived on the family farm in Chadron, Nebraska. And in addition to helping out on the farm, James was also what I like to call a dude cowboy, because he performed in and managed Wild West shows. And an article in 1902 Weekly Pioneer Times states that he was one of the most expert pistol shots in the world and was willing to meet anyone on a trial of skill. Now, for whatever reason, the family moved from Nebraska to Deadwood. They lived here from 1897 to 1905. And when James was involved in these Wild West shows, of course, he would often take Mary and Frida with him. So this was kind of an exciting and exotic environment that had for a young girl to be involved with. And I think it had an impact on Frida's upbringing. I mean, she was able to observe and interact with people from many different cultures and different backgrounds here. And she also learned how to shoot at all these Wild West shows. And boy, I'm telling you, that girl could shoot. She was really good. And she began performing when she was just 11 years old. I mean, that's the age of an elementary school kid, you know, come on, that's really young. But in 1904, she appeared in her very first, she appeared at the World's Fair in St. Louis, and she was there with Will Rogers. I'm sure everybody remembers that name. Will Rogers was showing off his roping skills, and she was showing off her shooting skills that she had. And the World's Fair was only her 13th exhibition that she'd ever given. I mean, can you believe that? The ones before that were probably on such a smaller scale, and then here she is at a young age at the World's Fair. That's pretty phenomenal, really. And she could shoot rifles, she could shoot shotguns, revolvers, and probably, I imagine, any kind of firearms that you would put into her little girl hands, she could probably handle quite easily. And when she was performing, her father would throw glass balls up into the air for her to shoot at. And that was a common thing that they did with exhibition shootings like that. And she rarely, if ever, missed. She was that good of a shot. In fact, in the 1903 Weekly Pioneer Times, there was an article that stated, Miss Frida, who is only a little girl, is an expert rifle and pistol shot and can duplicate anything which Annie Oakley ever did and do better shooting than that young woman, who has a worldwide reputation as a rifle shot. In fact, Miss Frida can beat her with the 6-shooter. So I think that says a lot about how talented this young girl was. And then Frida's 1905 diary, which we have in our collection here, I was reading through that and I really liked it because it gives us a lot of good information about her. It says in there that she practiced playing the piano every day. She read the Bible practically every night. And her father was often away on business trips for short periods of time, or sometimes longer, with his Wild West shows that he was managing. Oops, sorry guys, that's my phone going off. And sorry about that. And then her mother, for whatever reason, was ill with some kind of illness. It never was explained, but she was bedridden for days on end and while the father was gone. And then poor Frida, she had to take on all the household duties. That's quite a burden for a young girl. But in the diary, you never hear her complain about that at all, which I think really says a lot about that young gal. And she performed at the Spearfish Carnival in May of 1905. And she was the headliner there of the performers. And the carnival was very well attended by people who came to see her shooting talents and exhibition there. And then after the performance was over, in the diary, it says that the family headed back to Deadwood, and she had found a stray little kitten and her mom and dad let her keep it. So they went back to Deadwood on the train with the little kitten in tow. And she became very, very attached to that kitten because she's just a little gal. And then a couple days later, 2 dogs in the neighborhood attacked that cat. And Frida was just heartbroken. So she takes the cat in and she tries to nurse it back to health as best she could. But it was to no avail because the next day the kitten died from that. And she was absolutely heartbroken, you guys. So she dug a little grave and she performed a little burial for her animal, complete with an assortment of spring flowers that she had found in the area, which I think is just adorable. So then a few days later, the family left for what I assumed from the diary was just a short trip to the family farm back in Chadron. Frida enjoyed her time there, it said in the diary. Lots of friends and family came to visit. She got to ride horses and she played with all the farm animals. That she just enjoyed herself. Then towards the end of the diary, it said that she was attending school in Chadron. So that, of course, leads us to believe that they did not return to Deadwood and they were going to stay in Chadron, which they did. But what I found really most interesting about Frida's diary when reading it was the lack of attention that she gave to the skills that she had and the performances that she was in and how really talented she was. She was just a very humble and very down-to-earth and modest young girl. And she just wrote about her family, her friends, and everyday life in that diary. I mean, that's really refreshing, I think. And then when they were in Nebraska, Frida continued to do a bit of exhibition shooting with her dad around the regional area there. And next thing I find out is that on June 29th, 1911, Frida had married a gentleman named Guy Ramine. And he was a freight conductor for the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad. And then they also successfully ran an automobile repair shop there in Nebraska. And their only daughter, named Catherine, was born on the 12th of December, or 2nd of December in 1914. And in 1916, get a load of this, Frida starred in a movie called, of all things, Wild Bill and Calamity Jane in the days of 75 and 76. And Frida played, of course, Miss Calamity Jane. And then Frida's mom was also in the movie as well. And let me tell you, that movie, do not watch it for accuracy because they take a lot of liberties in that movie with the lives of Calamity Jane and Wild Bill Hickok and things in Deadwood. But I'm sure Frida and her mom, Mary, had a great time in that movie. And then after that, Miss Frida kind of falls off the radar. And the only thing I discover is that she and Guy got a divorce in 1930. And then she moved to Indianapolis, where her daughter Catherine lived. And she got a job there as a sales clerk in a drugstore. And Frida Hartzell, Romine, unfortunately died in 1964 at the age of 72. And I discovered this happened when I stumbled upon a small, very small, just 64 words long, only 64-word obituary for this woman in the Indianapolis Star. That's it. I mean, she had an amazing life, did a lot of things, and then it ended in just 64 words, which I think is kind of sad because she was, she had a lot going on for her. So that's our 4 fabulous females, guys. So I'd love to open it up for anybody that has questions. I'm sorry, we're kind of over, Thea. Oh,
that's all right. If anybody, I have promised everyone we'd be done at 1. So if you do need to leave, we are not going to have hurt feelings. We understand. If those of you who would like to hang out will ask and answer a few questions. All right. There are a couple questions in chat regarding Calamity Jane. This person said, I had heard she worked as a nurse at Calamity House up in the mountains above Lander, Wyoming. Is that just a myth?
Well, I have never heard that, but boy, it doesn't, I'm not the expert on her, but it doesn't mean that that wasn't true. I know that she nursed people down in the pest house, which is what they called, kind of a hospital isolation area for people that had, what was it? Smallpox at that
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And so and nobody would touch those people. And Calamity Jane was like, I'll go in there, I'll do it. So she did that for that period of time. I think it was 1878, maybe, that was happening here. And so, yeah, she would just step in and help like that.
Excellent. We did have another question from, must be one of our friends outside of South Dakota, said, was Deadwood a historic mining town? Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, it was. We
Yeah.
discovered, the gold was discovered here on the Custer expedition in 1874, and then word got out and everybody started coming here in 75 and really took off in 76 and 77, boy. So that's how we got our start.
That's excellent. Does anybody have any questions they want to unmute and ask? Looks like we do. All right, maybe not. I thought I saw somebody moving toward that. All right. Well, ladies, Tia and Carolyn, what an amazing presentation. I am inspired. I learned a lot. I am going to look up more on the Hartzell lady. That amazes me. And I know a guy whose last name is Hartzell, so I'm totally going to ask him if he's related.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this has been an absolutely enjoyable trip through Deadwood history, and especially for women. Thank you so much.
Well,
We
thank you,
appreciate your
Tia.
time.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. It was wonderful, and we'd love to be back again sometime.
You can count on that. I would definitely will be in contact. Maybe we'll do a longer one where we can talk about more.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. It is great to have you here. Thank you, everyone. Tune in with us for the rest of the week at 12:30 Central. We'll be here, OLLI, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of South Dakota. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Tia and Carolyn.
Bye.
Good luck with the COVID.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye, Jan.